let me sort of dive into this a little bit, this 3-yard rule. Help me understand why there was given so much leeway in this rule.
Well, it's a difficult rule to enforce when it's at 3 yards. One of the reasons we want to change it to 1 yard is that it's a subtle thing, Ryan. But if a player is headed downfield, if he's 1 yard downfield before the ball is thrown, the rule is that they can't be more than 3 yards downfield when the pass is released. And so, in order to call the foul, you got to know where the player is when the ball is released. Well, sometimes the quarterback's 10, 15 yards deep, and so now there's an 18-yard span in there where you've got to look and see where was the player when the ball was thrown. And if it's at 1 yard, he's not built up as much speed getting downfield as it has at 3. It's a subtle difference, but it's easier to officiate at 1 than it is at 3. By the way, sometimes the language is used that we were trying to go back to 1 yard. In fact, before the 3 yards was put in about 5 or 6 years ago, it was 0. In other words, the rule was he could not cross the line of scrimmage at all. And so the 1 yard proposal was sort of a balance between the two. And so what we've done from an officiating standpoint, we have altered our mechanics a little bit to have the head linesman and the line judge, those are the two guys that are right on the line of scrimmage, looking in, the officials on the line of scrimmage. And what we're doing is saying, okay, they're going to have more responsibility for this particular foul than they did before. It was the umpire's call, and typically the other officials didn't get involved in it. But we're saying, okay, the headlines and the line judge, now you're going to have more responsibility for checking on this, for making this call, because they've got a better look. They can see the point of release of the ball by the quarterback, and they can see better where that lineman is. But the reason for the same anyway, we've sort of, just by virtue of the fact that the players are moving more rapidly once they get to 3 yards, it turns out that if you look on, it's not that we deliberately say we're going to allow a little slop in that. It's just that when you look at film, when the ball is released and the umpire thinks it's at 3, in fact, the guy may be at 3.5 just because another yard, another half a yard in there happens so quick. And so what we're trying to do is say, okay, we're going to make sure by our mechanics changes that we're going to officiate this to the letter of the rule. That's not a change in philosophy. It's just that the mechanics will help us do what we need to do better.
You think the 1 yard would be easier to call as an official?
Yeah, I do. And that's not necessarily a reason to make a rule change, by the way. I mean, the Rules Committee always wants to know, how can this rule be officiated, whatever the rule is. Now, they're not going to make a change based on, well, we need to change this rule because it would be easier on the officials. That's not the deal. But if they ask us which is easier to officiate, yeah, it is easier to officiate at 1, just because the player is unlikely to be going as fast as he is when he's at 3. As I say, it's a subtle thing, and until you watch a lot of video of this, it's not easy to pick it up. But I've looked at so much video on this, I'm going blind now, and I can tell you that it's a lot easier at 1 than it is at 3.
Well, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but it went through one committee last year and it passed, but when it got to the oversight panel, it was turned down. Am I correct on that, the 1 yard rule?
Yeah, that's right. The Rules Committee passed it, but there's a committee within the NCAA structure called the Playing Rules Oversight Panel, PROP, P-R-O-P. And they have jurisdiction over all the rules committees of the NCAA, basketball, baseball, wrestling, soccer, whatever. And so they have oversight over all that. And so they flipped it. They overruled the decision of the football rules committee.
We've had a ton of defenders on, defensive guys, and not just Alabama guys. We've had guys like Mickey Andrews, and which I guess he is an Alabama guy, even though he spent a lot of time at Florida State. A lot of pro guys, and they just talk about how much of an advantage it is for the offensive side of the football when they're used to reading an offensive lineman and he's firing off the football. So I hope you understand why I'm putting an emphasis on this and asking this question, because our audience is a very smart college football audience, and we get peppered with this all the time, and I've made a lot of conversation out of it. So that's the reason why we're asking about this. So just go in.
It's a huge advantage for the offense because the defense is reading run. I mean, if the tackle or a guard is charging downfield, and the quarterback's rolling out and to the right, let's say, and the guard and tackle are headed downfield, the defense is thinking run. And so the safeties come up, and all of a sudden here goes that pass over the head. I mean, one of the reasons that the committee was interested in making it to 1 yard was the what we talked about earlier, the balance between offense and defense. So the committee felt like that this would be a little bit more balanced. We're sort of restoring a part of the equation to the defensive side of the ball. So that was the major reason for doing it. As I say, it is serendipitously easier to officiate, but that's not a reason for making the change. That's a unintended consequence of it. But the idea of it was to balance the defense and offense a little more.
How confident are you that this call will be strict in 2016? That you will be able to follow up with these mechanics and these adjustments to get that call correctly?
Well, we'll work very hard. I mean, we've had this mechanics change in actually since the middle part of the season last year. This is not a brand new thing for the 16 season. We put this in the middle of the season last year, and we got better at calling this foul as the season wore on. So I'm very confident. The officials are working on this in spring right now. You know, the officials are just like the players are working spring practice. The officials are officiating those spring practices, and you know there'll be an SEC crew down at A-Day game next weekend, and so they're working on this now. We'll emphasize it in our clinics and meetings that are going on even as we speak. So I'm very confident that officials are going to take care of this. That's not saying we won't miss something. I mean, we have to do that, but the idea is there. The seed is planted, and people are working hard to make sure that we get this right.
Let me ask you about setting the tempo of the game. Sometimes and this is from a casual observer. I mean, I'm in the press box. I've never officiated a game. But sometimes I see the tempo of the game where you guys are rushed to get situated, to get in place to make the correct call. Is tempo a bad thing for the officials?
Well, we tell the officials this to hustle but not hurry. We tell the officials to spot the ball, to come in at a sort of a crisp trot to get the ball placed down. It's inevitable that to some extent the officials may get caught up sometimes in the speed at which the offense wants to run. And by the way, I mean if the offense is not substituting, I mean when the offense sends in the substitute, then the center judge or the umpire, depending on what kind of crew it is, comes in and stands over the ball or prevents the snap to allow the defense time to match up. But I'm telling you, if the offense is not substituting, the defense is on their own because there's nothing that says that the ball can't be snapped once it's placed down. And the officials are not going to sprint to place it down. They're not in that big a hurry, but they are going to be expeditious about getting it down. But the offense, if the offense is not substituted, the defense is on its own in terms of getting itself prepared for the play. So that's something that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes in terms of what people understand about the pace of the game. The pace of the game, once the 40-second, when the 40-second clock was put in a number of years ago, which meant that the referee was no longer declaring the ball ready for play by blowing the whistle and making that signal, then that put the pace of the games to some extent in the hands of the offense. And the officiating community, we're saying it's our job not to control that, but to manage it. And so that's what we work hard at doing. And so I think you'll see that if you watch this carefully and time the time it takes between what the play clock reads when the team snaps the ball, it's people talk about how fast people run, but in fact if you look at this, the very fastest teams typically are at least 10, sometimes 12 seconds into the play clock before they snap the ball. So they're not going as fast as sometimes people make out that they are, and the official's responsibility is how to make it fair so that the offensive team can run their offense, but the defense has time to match up if it's a substitution. But remember, if the offense doesn't substitute, the defenses are on their own.